Early start today, folks, and it's a miserable wet day in the garden, but that's a perfect day to make a nice warming winter shepherd's pie. So like all good shepherd's pies, I'm going to begin with some mince. I'm using beef mince today, but you can use whatever mince you like. I quite often make this with corn mince. I've got the mince out of the packet and it's just a case now of just breaking it up a little bit. So I've broken the mince up and I'm going to add that into the wok with some olive oil and a couple of chopped red onions. So I'm going to fire up the wok, usual, turn it down, I don't want it incinerated, just nice and low. And now I'm just waiting for a break in the weather so I can go outside and get some more bits and pieces to go in this. Just while I'm waiting in the meantime, I'm going to add some Italian dried mixed herbs and an orange pepper chopped up also. So I've got the pepper and the dried mixed herbs added, and top tip, keep the inside of your pepper, pop it on the windowsill, let it dry out, then get the seeds out, replant them and grow more pepper plants. Just like these ones. Well, the weather's improved a little bit, so I'm going to go out in the garden and I'm going to get myself a few veggies to go in the shepherd's pie. Now this is called a Kohlrabi and it's a brassica, and the entire plant, leaves and stem are all edible. Now this is my plum tree, but I grow my runner beans up this, and there's one, and that one's a bit old now, so I think I'll leave that one for seed. I've got one at least anyway, and there's some more growing here, so let's have a look. Again, they're getting a little bit past their best. That one's okay. And that one, and that one will do as well. So, 4 runner beans to chop. Oh, and here's a swede. It's a golden variety, which I've managed to pull up alongside a beetroot. But there you go, we've got a double-headed one. So that will go in. Although I will remove the insect first. Pop the beetroot back in the ground. Nothing to see here. We'll have a leek. So I've got my veggies in the sink, I've given them a wash. I'm going to add to these some garlic which came out of the garden the other day. And I'm going to pick a few Swiss chard just to chop up to bulk it up a little bit as well. Next I'm going to chop the runner beans and the little leek, and I'm going to add them in. I'm going to just take off the edges of the runner beans where they're a bit stringy, so we don't get any stringiness in there. So those greens are in, and now it's time to add some more greens, because I'm going to add the leaves from the kohlrabi. I've washed it and I've picked off all the ones that were a bit big and old. These are all fine, and these will be chopped up and they will also be added because they're completely edible. So the kohlrabi is finally chopped and going in. Now I'm just going to use a couple of wooden spoons to lift the mince so it's not completely on the bottom all the time, and to at the same time to begin to break it up, because otherwise it just gets into big lumps and you don't want that. I want it all to mix and be of a similar consistency of meat and vegetables throughout. The green veggies, which are bulking it out at the minute, will really break down, and the mixture will go down quite a lot in the pan once it's all started to cook and soften. So I'm just going to wash my chard, make sure there's no bugs on it. So that's now washed and it needs to be cut finely. I'm just going to add the chard. There you go. The chard's a wonder vegetable. I can't believe it's not more popular than what it is. You can literally eat the whole thing apart from the roots. But kids, if you're not into chard, get into chard. So that's had a good stir up and I'm just going to let that simmer. I've got one more ingredient to put in this, and that is one of these garlic bulbs, which I'm just going to chop up and add to it. Now the garlic's in, it's getting another little stir, and I'll just keep moving it around periodically while it cooks and breaks down. And then we can move on to the next stage now while this is cooking away, and that is to prepare the mash to go on top of the pie. Just filling a saucepan with some cold water. It really is 4 seasons in one day in the garden today. Bit of salt for good measure. Unsurprisingly, the main ingredient in my mash is going to be these potatoes, but perhaps surprisingly, after a wash the skin is staying on, and that's because this is mashed potato which is designed to have a texture, and you'll see why when I start to make it. Okay, so I've got the potatoes now on. Now it's time for the next ingredient. So the next ingredient or ingredients are the swede that I picked from the garden and the kohlrabi. So I'm just going to use a really small sharp knife to take off the skin and these bits here and any mucky bits on this one, and then these are going to get added into the mash. So, cooking there. So I want these to boil for about 5 minutes before I add this into the mix, because these don't take as long to cook and they'll just end up going to mush otherwise. In the meantime, I've added some olive oil into this pan and I'm going to chop up one more red onion to fry in there. So the onions are in the pan, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of salt, and a few mixed herbs for good measure. I do like my mixed herbs. So now I'm playing the waiting game before these things get married together, and I've still got these to add into the mash as well. Now I'd normally put some beef oxo cubes in, but I don't have any, so we're going to put veggie ones in instead. So as you can see, now the mixture has cooked, the veg has gone down quite a lot. So I'm just going to bulk it up a little bit more with a few frozen peas, just for good measure. I forgot to film it, so my bad, but I've just added the turnip and kohlrabi into the potatoes as they've been boiling. They've obviously lowered the temperature, so I need to put the lid back on so it all comes to a boil again. I'm going to turn the onions off now, they look like they've cooked. And I think I'm going to turn the shepherd's pie mixture off also, because that looks fairly cooked to me. I'm playing the waiting game now. A watched pot never boils. So we've got the spuds and the turnip and the kohlrabi in there. Steamy. So the spuds go in the bowl and everything else. And now they get a good mash. Now I'm mashing them in here and not in the pan I cooked them in, because the pan I cooked them in was non-stick and I don't want to scratch it with the metal on here. Okay, now I did say that I was leaving the skins on the potatoes, and indeed I have, because this is going to have a texture, and when you eat this you won't even notice the skins, and I'll tell you why. Because the only texture that you'll notice is the onions, because the fried onions are now getting mixed into the mash. Now when I was growing up, my mum used to make a dish which she called galette lyonnaise. I don't know if that's the actual galette lyonnaise, but that's what she called it, and that were in Barnsley. So this is my homage to my mum's galette lyonnaise, which is going to go on top of the shepherd's pie. And the texture that you'll get, you'll just think it's onion. You will never think that you're eating potato skins, which are full of vitamins anyway. So just because we don't want to be too healthy, I'm going to add a bit of butter into this. So now it's a case of marrying the two together in the bowl, or I should say in the oven dish. So I'm just pressing the mixture down firmly because I want this to be a good and solid shepherd's pie, a real winter warmer and a filler-upper. I can't wait to try it. So now on goes the mash, and it needs to be completely covered in just the same way, pressed down and covered over. So I'm just smoothing it over. I can't get any more in this dish, and even better, there's some left over for tomorrow. Oh yes. Right, I'm just going to make some pretty patterns on top. I'm not sure why, but it's what people on telly do, so I'm just going to copy. Last but not least, I've just got a little bit of cheese. I'm going to grate some of it, and that's going to go on top. So I just put a sprinkling of cheese on top. This is really the all-encompassing meal. It's got everything. Mashed potatoes, fried onions, minced beef, chard, kohlrabi, swede, my word. A little bit of everything. So final sprinkling of black pepper on the top. So there it is. So this is now going to go into an oven at 160, and I'm going to have it in there for about half an hour. Everything's cooked, I just want it all to blend together. I want it to be hot, piping hot inside, and I want the cheese to melt, but I don't want it to burn. Oh, it's heavy. Right, the moment of truth. Oh, yes. Just look at that. That is a work of art. Beautiful. Listen to the bubble. Cheese, mashed potato, minced beef, fried onions, lots of vegetables. Oh yes. Let's have a look. Oh, got a bit of leakage. So there we go, you can see the layers, and that is just perfect. There it is, served with Brussels sprouts and some nice rich beef gravy. Perfect for a miserable winter's night. Oh yes. Delicious. And don't nobody go telling me it's a cottage pie, not a shepherd's pie. I made it. It is what I say it is. Cheers, folks.